Hello. Today I'd like to talk about the so-called caravan of potential immigrants from Central America that has been so prominent in the national news lately. I'd like to focus on the geography and the topography and shed some light on the possibilities and indeed the realistic probabilities in contrast to the commentary that we're hearing so much in the news and from politicians. Let's begin with a look at a map of the United States, Mexico, and northern Central America. This particular caravan allegedly started from an exodus out of primarily Honduras and Guatemala, and perhaps El Salvador as well. That's El Salvador just below and between Guatemala and Honduras. The first thing that jumps out at me looking at this map is why someone in Wyoming, for example, would be concerned about this. Well, let's look at the potential paths for these people in this caravan of invaders. And let's just say for the sake of argument that there should be concern anywhere and everywhere along the southern border of the United States. Now let's start to add a filter of reality. California? Well, California is about 800 miles as the crow flies, and it's farthest away and takes the longest. Remember, these people are walking, and that means maybe 20 miles a day. So that's about 40 days. Now why is this a topic for an election that's happening next week? Well, Arizona then. No, still about 650 miles in a straight line, so still about 32 days away. Okay, fine. New Mexico and El Paso, they should be on alert. No, still about 600 miles as the crow flies and still a full month away. Am I giving you a clue? Well, if it were you and me and we were coming from Central America to the United States, what would be our shortest and quickest path? Well, the shortest and quickest path would actually mean we'd have to walk on water, and that hasn't been done successfully in quite some time that I know of. So let's just say that the highest probability is that they're coming to South Texas and only to South Texas. Tell me again which part of this is a super concern for Iowa or Nebraska? Well, this particular view shows that the roads are in fact not as straight as a crow flies, and perhaps why so many of the people in the caravan are likely to just stop once they're in Mexico. They're out of danger from the country that they fled. They can stop walking anytime they want. And bonus, the people in Mexico actually speak the same language. So to quote Marissa Tomei from My Cousin Vinny, they blend. Here we see the ports of entry most likely. Brownsville, my hometown, McAllen, and Laredo. Although Laredo is another 100 or so miles away, so why would they walk an extra 5 days? You can see that once Highway 101 splits at this Y, the 2 points of entry are fairly equidistant, although Brownsville appears to be more of a shade of a straight line. A little closer view of Brownsville, McAllen, and their Mexican counterpart cities, Matamoros and Reynosa. You see the gray squiggly line, which is actually the Rio Grande River. I wonder if people realize how much of a straight line it is not. So let's focus on Brownsville and Matamoros just because I said it's the closest and most likely. From a reference perspective, those mothers and children you heard about that were separated recently at the border, much of this happened here, and one of the detention centers is in Port Isabel, which is just a scant 20 miles away from Brownsville. What I'd like for you to note in this view is that Matamoros is a city with streets and buildings which will have to be navigated. This would be like the biggest parade you've ever seen, and it's not just going to pour straight and quickly through the city and spill into the United States. Here's a look at the main bridge across the river in Brownsville. There's a smaller and much older one about a mile to the west, but it's very much the same otherwise. Let's continue. Again, you see the meandering path of the river. A bit closer in, and you can start to see that the width of the river is about the same as the multi-lane bridge. Well over 100 feet, and that's not counting the slope of the banks. So tell me, who is going to be throwing rocks more than 100 feet and with pinpoint accuracy to hit a soldier or anyone else in the face? It's a different scenario, folks. It shouldn't even be coming up in this conversation. I wanted you to see what goes on because some might ask, well, what if these people are crossing the bridge in a seemingly orderly fashion, but decide to jump in and swim the rest of the way, or they decide to just run for the river instead of taking the bridge? Well, note the curved chain link fence preventing that climbing. But in this picture taken by my good friend Eric Schlegel for the Dallas Morning News, you see the Border Patrol speedboats, this guy holding a machine gun, this guy holding a machine gun. Are you still so terrified up in Wisconsin? Well, what happens when they get here? Here's the end of the bridge as it enters or leaves the U.S. And note, Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, Fort Brown Station, and the cargo truck parking lot and inspection station. There is nowhere else for people to go when they cross over the bridge into the United States. This is where these folks will be processed and legally claim asylum, or if they don't, they'll be processed for deportation, as happens every other day. Another view of the bridge, and I'd like to show you the wall or fence. This is why paying for a bigger, longer wall makes no sense at all. See how far inland it is. They're already here. And here's a closer view. Already well into the United States, folks. So you say, what if they decide to go around the bridge and avoid all the bureaucracy? Okay, sure. Maybe they're not tired of walking yet. Maybe they want to walk another 15 miles or so to the east and trudge through the salt flats along the south edge of Highway 4 so that they can cross Highway 4 only to trudge to the salt flats on the north edge of Highway 4 and only to end up at the ship channel at the port of Brownsville and swim the 100 yards or so across the 50-foot deep saltwater channel, dodging oil tankers and shrimp boats along the way. Yeah, let's try that. And oh, by the way, if you get caught, you're actually halfway to the detention center at Port Isabel. And if somehow some of these invaders do make it illegally by swimming across the river somewhere between Brownsville and McAllen, you see their path to the north takes them generally along either US Highway 281 or Highway 77. Of course, they can't walk along the road and hitchhike. It's far too easy to be caught. What happens to those that do make it is they end up having to navigate through this savage no man's land of the massive King Ranch, where they risk dehydration, heat and sunstroke, snake bite, hypothermia, disorientation, starvation, and death. And for those who do survive that, we have the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol checkpoints at Falfurrias and Cerrito respectively, keeping those of us to the north safe from invasion. So to recap, who in the whole of the continental United States needs to really be concerned about this? Well, how do we know? By taking a look at the realistic path. Hey, why is this an issue for next week's election if these people are still a month away? And of those thousands of people, given what you now know about their realistic points of entry, how many do you think are really going to cross illegally? Remember, illegal means not going through proper Customs and Border Patrol. And now that you've seen how few options they really have, do you really think that all 7,000 can even realistically cross the border illegally? All I'm saying is now that you know this, you'll know better and be able to decide for yourself with facts. Thank you, and thanks to Google Maps for the graph images.